Hello, everybody. We have Stephen Lee for our final session in the business and product management track. The title of this track is Integrating Games to Live Operations. Stephen Lee is from Deca Games, so I know everybody wants to listen to somebody from Deca Games. Stephen Lee is a man that you can listen to. Stephen, the stage is all yours. I'm going to go off camera.
Great. Thanks very much. I will just share my screen. Uh, cool. Well, thank you all for being here today for this final talk. I know it's been a busy week. I really appreciate your time. My name is Steven. I've been in the free-to-play publishing space for a dozen years, and like most of you, I've been a gamer my whole life. In recent years, I've been looking to do more meaningful work, which is one of the reasons why I joined DECA. And also one of the reasons why I'm helping out a lot of NGOs and nonprofits in my spare time in the games industry. So I have to say, I really admire what you guys are doing with this event in IGDC. I love the turnout and the passion of the developer community in India, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. And I hope that by this time next year, I'll be able to attend in person. So anyway, today I'm here to talk about a topic that's become increasingly important in our industry, and that's live operations. So how do you guys define live ops? There's a lot of different definitions, but it's usually something around events, and it's usually very KPI driven. In today's talk, I'd like to show you that it's a lot more than that. In fact, live ops encompasses everything that you need to look at after the game is launched. So today I'll talk about how we tackle this considerable topic here at DECA Games. I'll explain why it's important, how we consider live ops opportunities, how we transition the games over, and some live ops best practices that have really helped us to succeed. So a quick introduction to DECA Games. So we're headquartered here in Berlin, where it's 4:30 p.m. and unfortunately pitch black outside already. But it is what it is. So we're now over 200 people, and aside from our Berlin headquarters, we're completely distributed, and we've been that way since day one, which has allowed us to attract some really awesome talents. The senior leadership of DECA comes from some of the most successful free-to-play companies like Kabam, Zynga, etc. We're known for our expertise in live operations, so we help studios to take over their older games, the ones that they are not able to fully support anymore. So in some cases, we even acquire those games. So we pay our partners up front to acquire the games and to make sure that they're in good hands for years to come. Speaking of acquisitions, we ourselves were also acquired just over 1 year ago. So we're now part of the Embracer Group. For those of you that are not familiar with Embracer, we're now the largest games organization in Europe with over 80-something studios. And when we were acquired last year, we were the first sort of mobile company to join the group, and certainly the first free-to-play company to join the group. And since then, we've been adding and partnering with a lot of some of these companies that you see here within the DECA operating group in Embracer. So we are helping to lead the charge to grow the mobile business within the group, which is really exciting. So here's our portfolio of games. Most of them are free-to-play mobile games. If you guys have been playing mobile games for a while, you no doubt recognize quite a few of these. A lot of them are super old, but still going strong after many, many years. Here's our mission statement at DECA. So creating an experience that players will come back to daily for decades. And how do we do that? I mean, we all know that running live games is challenging, right? And the vast majority of games that are launched don't last very long. So the ones that do, the ones that do actually last and gain some traction do face a lot of challenges. Now, here's just some examples of the challenges that studios face with their games, especially older live games, the ones that have already been marketed and scaled. For example, your team gets restless, your players get bored or frustrated. At the same time, you have limited resources. So over time, it doesn't really make sense to maintain an older game at 100%, especially if you have either a newer game to build or to work on, or B, a bigger game in your portfolio already that generates more revenue, right? It makes more sense to focus on the bigger game. So what can studios do? Usually they'll start to scale the team down, and eventually maybe they'll leave a skeleton team. They'll leave the game in maintenance mode or harvest mode, where you just kind of recycle events, set it and forget it. And ultimately, this really limits how the game can perform. And in a lot of cases, the studios will even eventually leave nobody on the game at all. And we call these sort of zombie apps. There are thousands and thousands of these in the stores just sitting there. They're still collecting revenue, but it's not a great approach, right? Because it's not really great for the long-term health of the game. So, every time you have more than one game in your portfolio, you're always there's this push-pull thing. If I work on one game, then my other game will suffer, and as soon as I shift focus to one direction, then the other direction or the older games usually suffer. So that's the challenge that we're helping to try to solve for the games industry. So what usually happens is that games are not really reaching their full potential anymore, especially the older games. And as things continue to decline, your players become really unhappy. Now, loyal players are super valuable. And in the context of live operations, I can't emphasize how much you want to avoid this. If your players are unhappy, they're in danger of lapsing or moving to new games. And you guys know the cost of acquiring players, what it is. So if you have a loyal player, you should do whatever you can to keep them happy and playing your game. So that's where we come in. We consider a lot of games for takeover, and here's some things that we in particular pay attention to. So you can think about these as you're taking care of your own games. So points of failure: was the game built or operated by one person? Is that person still available? Is all the player data on a physical server somewhere? For some example, we see this a lot with older games. Try to minimize these points of failure whenever you can. A word about accounts. So when we take over a game, a lot of times we try to transfer the game from the original developer account to ours. Now, account transfers are really complicated. Transferring from one entity to another. For example, if you're using iOS and your game uses iCloud saves, for example, you can't actually transfer that game from one developer account to another. So look out for that. Now, as another example, if you're transferring an app from, let's say, North America to Europe, the prices change from dollars to euros. And believe it or not, you have to manually change your packages. So a lot of things behind transfers and account transfers that are really kind of a pain. Um, what kind of shape or quality is the code in? We pay a lot of attention to this before we take over a game. Has it been properly documented? Look out for this. Spaghetti code, it's not a deal breaker, but be prepared to invest in it. You may have to refactor or maybe even reverse engineer stuff in order for it to really operate at its best. Now, when we decide to move forward, these are the three kind of main keys to transitioning a game over to take over the game from a live ops perspective. So the first key is basically the setup. We usually try to replicate the original or the optimal setup. At the same time, we're trying to remove the inefficiencies. I mentioned we've been remote first from day one, which has been a big help. It's allowed us to hire the best talents wherever they may be, and we're not restricted by a geographic location. Second key is the knowledge transfer. So that's the tech training, live ops training. We try to utilize sort of like a diving buddy approach. If any of you are scuba divers here, so our team sits in the same room, or in some cases now the same Zoom call with the original team to work on releases together. And initially they're doing it, and eventually we're doing it, but they're still around to make sure that we're able to handle things in case something goes wrong. The third key is focusing on stability. So there's a temptation to try to centralize your tech, or to perhaps you want to use the same tool across all your games. But it's very important not to change the tech at all. Now, this applies to attribution partners, SDKs. So be flexible. Don't be so insistent on using the same tech, on centralizing your infrastructure, at least not yet. Stability is super key, especially with older games. There's a temptation to want to hit the ground running, but from our experience, the key is to really not try to break anything. So I'll get into some examples of the things you can do without breaking the game in just a little bit. Some tips to help with taking over a live game and to help mitigate some of the red flags that we just talked about. So first of all, whenever you can, try to have a dedicated project manager, meaning not shared across multiple projects. Because you really need access to everything. You have to have visibility on everything before we take it over. And in the handover and transferring of accounts, there's a lot of consolidation of data and lots of details. While we love Apple, Google, and Facebook, unfortunately, they're not really set up to make transferring accounts very easy. So if you're trying to do this with a shared resource, you'll end up missing things or wasting a lot of time on stuff. Trust me when I say it's a lot of wasted time, literally weeks of work. Um, Next one, record training sessions. That's fairly straightforward. Hire native speakers. So we talked about the code and documentation a minute ago. So be sure to hire people who can speak the language of the documentation. So for example, if your game was documented in Russian, hire a Russian speaker. Do not rely on Google Translate or other tools. It's just not the same, and you're going to miss some things. Finally, it's really important to find the right personality, especially to work on older or mature products. So, enthusiasm and love for the product, people that get satisfaction on taking care of older games, is super important. And I strongly prefer this over someone that's younger, more jumpy, or looking for a rapid career advancement. So, operating older games maybe isn't the sexiest thing, but for a hotshot engineer. But remember, our expectation is that we're going to be operating these games for a long, long time. So at Deca, for us, it's at least 10 years, which we've been able to do so far. So, all right, we've been able to successfully take over the game. What's next? This is the live ops part of the talk. Now, in our almost 6 years of existence, we've taken over almost 20 games across PC and mobile. Here's some of the best practices that have worked really well for our teams. Now, first of all, low-hanging fruit. So what are the simple things that require minimal investment? I've listed some of them here. ASO, optimizing your ads waterfall if your game monetizes through ads. Sometimes it helps for older games to just have a new team and new players looking at a game to see if it's still what you're doing in the game still makes sense. So I'll show you an example. So this is the first game that I helped to bring to Deca. It's a game called Zombie Catchers. It was originally developed by a Finnish studio called Two Men and a Dog. This game was launched back in 2014, has over 120 million downloads since then. And the challenge is that because it was literally developed by two men, they were working on their game, on their next game, and they didn't really have a chance to update this game for over a year. So when we acquired the game, we didn't really get on the content treadmill right away. We decided to look under the hood, and we did a lot of the low-hanging fruit that I just described. So optimizing the ads. We noticed that the game had a really strong organic install, so we focused on ASO, and we tried to capitalize on this. So a lot of the things that we talked about, we refactored the code as well. So how did we do with this? After a double-digit decrease when we acquired the game, the revenue increased and the installs also increased by double digits over the same period after we took it over. And so that's a pretty significant turnaround with not doing a whole ton of new content, new features, by just focusing on the easy fixes, the low-hanging fruit. Now, earlier this year, we set records for Zombie Catchers in terms of revenue and installs, and the game is now in its 7th year, which is miraculous for a mobile game, a casual mobile game. Now, Dragonvale, this is a game that we acquired from Hasbro back in 2019, one of the oldest in our portfolio. It was originally launched 10 years ago, has over 50 million installs. One of the things that we noticed during our takeover was that Dragonvale has a huge following and it has a ton of content, but at the same time, there's a huge percentage of new players coming in all the time, and a lot of these players were having a really hard time digesting what to do because there's so much to do in the game, and the design was a little bit older. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how to simplify the early game experience and all the information that the newer players were taking in. So again, looking at the game with fresh eyes, we tried to optimize this user experience, the first time user experience, and we tested this, and we're very, very quickly able to turn the game around after we took it over. So that's just another example for you. Another best practice, experimentation. So basically trying new things, staying nimble, trying to come up with new ideas, experiment. Now, coming up and trying new things doesn't have to be expensive, and I'll show you what I mean in the next few slides. But if you do choose to invest in new features and new tools, or maybe even a metagame that really helps the long tail of a game, investing in new development can really pay off. So those of you that are mobile gaming veterans may remember these two games. They were originally developed by Funzio. They were top grossing in tier 1 countries in 2011, 2012. One of the problems that we were facing when we acquired these games was that we noticed that the whales were reaching saturation points. So almost all the available items had been purchased. So we really had to come up with something new to extend the long tail of the game. So after a lot of brainstorming, we came up with something that would be appealing for whales, but without cannibalizing the importance of older stuff. So we came up with something called boosters. Now, these are bonuses. They're basically consumables that can be used for a limited time. So we spec'd out the mechanics, and as a test, we decided to do a trial run with the players. We communicated everything to the players via the community forums of the game, and we actually had the bonuses applied via backend tools. So we were able to achieve, again, double-digit monthly revenue increase. And because of how we executed this, there was actually zero time spent on new development because everything was done on the back end. So again, experimentation without having to invest a lot in terms of new feature development. So Knights and Dragons, this game was originally developed by Ayugo and published by Gree. One of the things we noticed in the game was that seasonal events were really limiting the life cycle of players. So people were coming in for one season and then churning out. So we really needed to address the churn, especially given the age of the game. Again, if you're losing a long-term whale, that could be disastrous for an older game. So we decided to introduce a seasonal shop where old items could act as currency to get new items. So this gives players an advantage if they had accumulated a lot of items over the years by staying loyal to the game. We also extended the capabilities of the crafting system so that items could be used across seasons. So that's sort of like, this is how the shop looked before, and this is how it looked after we revamped it. And how did we do? We decreased the churn by 66%, which is huge. And then the new capabilities and recipes led to more spending from the players as well, which was a really nice byproduct. So again, experimentation without investing a whole ton in terms of new features and tons of drastic changes to the game, but just by looking at what you have and talking to the players and figuring out how to pull them back in. Now, the final practice that I'll be covering today is engaging the community. So to be as open as possible with you guys, this is actually the very first thing that you should look at when you take over a game. And while this may seem very obvious to some of you, I save this one for last because I cannot emphasize how important it is. I mean, community management is the single most important thing you can do. We like to call our community in our games super fans, and by super fans I mean people who have been playing the game for years. Some of them from day one, and they may even know the game better than we do. Um, consider user-generated content, keep talking to them, try to have an open and honest dialogue with players. In some cases, make your players stakeholders in the game. Now, we have game sages and players that we're talking to on a daily basis. We have shareholder meetings on a regular basis as well, so they really feel a sense of ownership for the game, and that keeps them invested and coming back every single day. So the best example that I can share from this is actually from our oldest game. It's a game called Realm of the Mad God. This was originally launched in 2010. It's a really hardcore roguelike RPG. We acquired this from Kabam back in 2016. While there was a lot to work with, there was also a lot of issues with the game. Now, most prominently, the game had a very strong sort of pay-to-win feeling, which was very divisive among the community. And when we took over the game, they were very vocal in letting us know this. And so we had to think really long and hard about, okay, how do these players are clearly unhappy about the situation? What can we do about it? Here's some of the examples of what we did to engage the community and get them more on board with what we're doing. So first of all, we invested in tools to help give players more customization. So I talked about user-generated content before. So users are generating new skins, new maps, and so they knew the game better than we could have ever known at that stage when we acquired the game. So to the players, we weren't just, another random developer trying stuff. We were the content is coming from fellow players, right? Creating exciting new content for their peer group. So this is an important distinction, right? You're actually coming at them from the peer perspective, and not just like, hey, we know what's best as a developer, because they very clearly know the game better than we do. So we were emphasizing customization. So a lot of the user-generated skins became sought after prizes. They were really limited and scarce, so it became a virtuous cycle. People would sort of chase these items, and because a lot of the content was user generated, we're able to operate the game with relatively less manpower. We didn't have to crank out this new content. The players were really enthusiastic about doing that for themselves, and we just gave them the means to do this, and they're really happy about it. So after our takeover, how did we do? We were actually able to double the revenue. We were actually able to triple the number of daily active customers. Daily active customers is essentially the number of paying users. And most importantly, all of this growth happened by spending zero money on marketing or on user acquisition. So this game is over 11 years old now and still going strong. So this really underscores how powerful your player community can be and how vital it is to engage with them and to earn their trust and to really show them that you care. So if you take care of your super fans and your loyal players, they'll reward you in amazing ways. And this example from Realm of the Mad God really highlights this to great effect. So investing in your community, once again, is the single best way to invest in the long-term future of your game, especially from a live ops perspective. So I know that's a lot. So just to sum up some main ideas, I mean, live operations is an ongoing effort. It's more than just events. It's more than just KPI. There's a lot of different things you can try to keep your game performing at its best. There's a lot of creative workarounds, and a lot of things that you can do to experiment. And one of the things I'll mention is that sometimes experiments don't work, and that's okay. You can definitely roll back mistakes or things that players don't respond well to, as long as you have the players' trust, right? And so our communities in our games, they know that we're coming from the same place as them, which is we want the best for the games and to provide the best possible experience. So that makes it okay for us to make mistakes. We own them, and they let us hear about it, and we change things, and we continue to evolve, and we continue to experiment to try to make them happy. And then, yeah, as your games continue to age, remember to listen to your players and your community. Put them first. A lot of times they'll tell you what they want, and you just have to know how to listen to them and how to communicate with them. Again, a lot of times with older games, the players know the game better than you do, so they will tell you what's best for the game and help to steer you in the right direction. So with that, I think that is it for me. And I wanted to say finally, I know it's been a long week for you guys, and time is a valuable resource that we can't get back. So I really appreciate you guys choosing to spend your time with me today. And if you have any questions, I'd be super happy to take them. If there's any other way that I could be of service, this is my email. Please feel free to reach out. I would be happy to connect with each and every one of you if you have the time. Thanks very much.
We have a couple of questions from the audience. Abhishek wants to ask how important is to focus on building community for longer retention?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I thought I just mentioned that it's basically the most important thing you can do for the long-term health of your game is to really focus on building the community. Usually, if your game has been around for a while, there is a community somewhere, and you just have to find out where that community is or where they exist, where they communicate with each other. It could be on Discord, it could be on forums. In the case of Realm of the Mad God, the last example that I shared, we found them on Reddit, which was really funny. So they can be anywhere. You just have to kind of find them and sort of reach out and with an open mind and try to build that communication channel and let them feel that they have a voice and that they're being heard.
Sure. Hey, Stephen, thanks so much for doing this. And there was this other question that was coming in. Do we need a different mindset for doing the live ops? I guess what they mean by that is, people who build the games, do they necessarily need to be the live ops guy? Because there's a different mindset altogether, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that you're definitely onto something, and I think that the definition has changed over time. I think when I first started in the games industry, we kind of always talked about live ops almost as like an afterthought. Like, the game is ready for launch, and we're ready for live ops, and we're just sort of recycling the same events over and over again. And I think that has since evolved and matured to more of what we're talking about now, which is like, building a rapport with the community and really taking care of them, and not just doing the same thing over time. I think after a while, no matter how addictive a game is, over the years, you're going to eventually get bored with the same stuff over time. And it's always helpful to evolve your thinking and try to come out with new content or new challenges, new ways for players to engage in the game and hopefully spend time and hopefully money in the game. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a ever evolving definition, I think.
All right. I have this one question that I'll take the other one. Okay, the question is, so there are various methods of building community, right? I remember someone has their own forums and so on and so forth. But Discord seems to be another method these days. And are you using any of Discord channels or for any of your games, or would you still like to have the traditional method of doing that?
No, I think we're totally open. We are using Discord for some of the games. For us, there's no sort of single prescriptive approach or a single channel that works the best. As I mentioned, it's basically the players to kind of decide how they want to engage with the game and with the community, their fellow players. So we try to meet them and see them where they're at. So that could be Discord. Absolutely. I think that's becoming a much more valuable platform these days as games continue to evolve. And a lot of times people also love, playing games on Discord, right? And sharing that experience with the community and sometimes with developers, and developers, vice versa, also love playing, doing playthroughs of the game and engaging their community as well. So absolutely, I think Discord is an awesome, very, very powerful tool.
Right. Cool. And this is my personal, question would be like, so, there are games that you have been working on as Deca games, which you have to pin over, which has like 10 years of, lifetime and so on, right? And one of the key challenges that someone would come across is the technology upgrades, right? And, there would be not just Unity or something of the sort, right? But some of the high-end techniques that are coming in, maybe some AI-related, stuff that is coming in, or there are better mechanism of leaderboards and all. So, is there a way you guys or have some form of a measure or some kind of a decision-making pattern that, hey, when you think it makes sense for us to upgrade this tech, or integrate a new tech altogether?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think there's always that internal debate, right? When is the time to rebuild something, and I think it really there's no sort of single right answer. I think you really have to understand the user experience, and if it becomes, if it reaches the point where it becomes really frustrating for players and the game's not running properly, or it's laggy or what have you, the game crashes a lot and there's a lot of technical limitations, then absolutely I think it's the right time. We actually rebuilt Realm of the Mad God into a Unity client recently, and after almost 10 years, and the players have responded accordingly. They love the new product. Even it still has the same pixel art look and feel, but it hums a lot more optimally now than it used to. So yeah, I think for those people that are not prepared to reinvest, I think you're playing with fire, because eventually, tech will just become obsolete, right? And it's always good to keep an eye out for your players and make sure they have the best experience.
Sure. And what technology was that in? Was it in Coco or?
Actually, the Realm of the Mad God was in Flash, believe it or not, and people were still playing it, finding ways to play it on Flash, and which is remarkable. But yeah, we decided it was time to build it in Unity. I actually see a question from the community, which I would love to address. So it's from Mahesh Rajan. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. So I think he's asking, do we need a separate mindset for live ops?
Yeah.
Like the guys who are building the game should not necessarily be the live
Yeah.
ops team. Yes,
We covered.
I think that's a really great question. It's absolutely true. You do not necessarily need to be part of the live ops team. I think with some games you actually see, people outsourcing their community management, which I would not recommend. But sometimes live ops people are really focused on the elder part of the game and not necessarily on new development. But with that being said, I think it's critical for your live ops team to work really, really closely with the developers on the team, so that they can understand what's coming or what people really want and what they're looking for, and discuss if it makes sense to try to listen to the players and provide the new stuff, the new content, the new features, the new updates that they're asking about. So, I hope that answers your question, Mahesh.
Yeah. Hey, one question that I would like to ask Stephen. I mean, when you have this long-running games, obviously there are whales, users, and all. Do you guys have a special? I mean, do you guys have, in the sense? I mean, do you guys offer do a special kind of a VIP service for like whale users, or some in other terms, like someone who puts in a lot of money, and some other, you take very good care of them, or how does it work?
So for us, it depends on the game. So it depends on what we inherit when we take over and when we acquire the game. So if there's an existing system where someone is a VIP based on their spending history, then we're aware of that, but we're not necessarily doing that in a unified way across all of our games from a Deca live ops perspective. But I think like a lot of people are wondering about this, especially with IDFA, and how do you keep track of your whales and your VIPs. I think there's a lot of ways to do that. There's a lot of ways to get your loyal players to opt in to new updates, or where you can identify them and build a direct channel to them and for them to reach out to you. So I think there's a lot of ways to do that. We're not really centralizing it, as I said, but it doesn't hurt to pay attention to your highest spenders, because obviously that makes a huge difference in the performance of the game.
Sure. Last question, I promise. So a game which is surviving for so long would have like users across all the geographies, all the. So how localization plays a role, because you might have like very focused groups now, and how do you guys plan? Like maybe if you have a lot of users in the eastern part of the world, and then you might like to focus a special event for them, or is that something you practice?
Yeah, that's it's a great question. It's something that we are not actively doing. So when we look at the country level data for our games, if there's like a critical mass, and let's say among the top 5 countries is a language that's not readily available, or we don't have a native speaker in house, then yes, we will hire somebody that can help to take care of that community, because I think it's really worth it to do so. So but it does come up from time to time, and I think it's really worth investing, because I think we've all been there, right? When we try to communicate and you get a generic Zendesk form or something that has been Google translated, or you're chatting with a bot and that person is not very clearly not hearing you and not understanding the problem. So when you can really show your players that you care about the experience that they're having and about addressing their concerns and hearing them, I think it can only help to take care of your game even more.
Great. Stephen, thank you so much for taking time. I know you have a busy week. You have been speaking into a lot of events, and thank you. Guys, this was a session by Stephen Lee from Deca Games. Deca Games, popularly known for their amazing offering as live ops for all the games that they have been working on. Great retention is what they try to aim for, and a lot of people really admire the kind of work that you guys have been doing. So, Stephen, congratulations for all the work, and thank you so much for joining in.
Hey, congratulations to you guys for putting on this awesome event year after year. It's my pleasure to be here. I would love to see you guys in person next year. And as I said, please feel free to reach out if you'd like to connect or if you have any questions. It would be my pleasure to talk to you guys. Thanks again.
Super kind of you. Super kind of you, Stephen. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining in. This was the last session of India GDC 2021 for business and product. And please take the form and fill in, and we'll we would love to take your feedback. Please copy the link and paste it on the browser, and this will help us to bring more awesome speakers like Stephen. So thank you so much, and bye now.